Right. Good to
Just
go?
about, yes. And Emma
Good.
Noyce has joined as well.
Fantastic. Hi, Emma.
Yeah. Okay, would you like me to start or
That'd be great. Yeah,
I
thank you.
didn't know if anybody asking. Hello, welcome everyone. I am Emma Noyce. I am an assistant director in Hampshire County Council, but more importantly today, I am also a trustee of Libraries Connected and sponsor to the Libraries Connected element of the Know Your Neighbourhoods project. And it has been an absolute delight to be part of this project. And I'm really, really excited about this event today because as a panel member, in the last, probably in about a 3-month period this summer, we reviewed.
Oh, I think you've gone on mute, Emma. Sorry.
Okay, better. So I don't know where we got to, but as a panel member, over this summer we reviewed 26 applications and gave away about £2.3 million in funding, which was at the start, because of the nature of this project. I thought would be quite a straightforward exercise because the 27 areas in question were already predetermined. We had an amount and we were like, well, actually, is it just going to be a tick box thing? It was anything but that. So I wanted to thank all of the applications for the amount of thought that you have put into your applications to this project. And as a panel, I can absolutely say that every single one of those applications we have discussed, we have considered, we've thought about the strengths, we've thought about areas that could be improved. And as a panel, we've also developed a really, a much stronger understanding of what we were looking for through the process in terms of projects that really get to grips with what the issues around isolation and loneliness are in your local areas, what might be the barriers for people joining in or attending the events or activities that you put on, or volunteering with you, and really how you see yourselves working with communities and working in partnerships. And therefore, it has been an incredibly robust process to review all of these applications. And some of you will have had your applications simply approved. Some of them we will have returned with a bit of advice, and some of them we might have asked for a bit of reshaping. But all of those, I think I just wanted to say that we really appreciate and welcome the effort that you've put into shaping those applications. And now we're at the point where we have 27 areas, 26 applications, because we've got one that covers a couple of areas. And they're really exciting. We cover volunteering, we cover activities, we've got coordinators, we've got walking groups, reading groups, local history. There's such a range of subject areas. And fundamentally, I just wanted to say that this is a learning project. Not everything that you try will work first time. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that there will be successes, there'll be failures, there'll be events that you open the door to and there may be no one there. And that's how it goes, because we're working with with people who have a number of kind of complex issues and potentially a number of barriers to attending. So not everything that we try through these projects will work immediately. But the important thing about a learning project is to reflect and to share. And throughout this, both the panel and the project team and the project board, we've all been absolutely clear that the value of this project is going to be also through sharing experiences and ideas, sharing good practice, understanding what's working in some areas and what's not working in areas, and coming together to share that both within this group, but also in the future, potentially beyond that. So I don't think I've got anything to say apart from that, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from some of the projects and some of the wider issues this morning, and I will hand over. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. So first up, we have Laura Lowther, who is the Vision for Volunteering lead at NCVO, who's going to talk about their plans and aspirations.
Morning, everybody. Really lovely to be here, and brilliant introduction from Emma just about the phenomenal projects that we have in this space, and just the the range of work and kind of community impact that libraries have and other spaces. So I've been in this role since March, and on day 3, I think it was, I had to give a presentation in front of a packed room at an arts council, and I think it was Volunteering Futures room, and there was a lot of library projects in there. Obviously, I was terrified just to do that presentation about the vision, but I got to learn just what amazing spaces libraries are. I mean, I already love them on a personal level, but yeah, just hearing about all the different work that happens in libraries and different ways of engaging and supporting communities as well. I heard a lot of supporting vulnerable people in communities. So yeah, phenomenal stuff. So apologies also because I've got a cold, so I've got a slightly wobbly voice. So I'll do my best. So just going to share my screen. Emma, I'm not sure if it's allowing me to share.
I think you are co-host, but I can share on your behalf if that's easier. And you just let me know when you want me to move on.
That would be fantastic if you can. I don't know if it's because I don't know if it's a Zoom thing that my settings are a little bit different, but it doesn't seem to be letting me. That would be lovely if possible.
No problem.
And what I'll do, so some of you might have heard about the Vision for Volunteering. Some of you might have heard me chat about the Vision for Volunteering. But either way, this is just an introduction. And then I'll leave a little bit of space afterwards for a little bit of a chat if that's helpful, or pop something in the chat box as well. So if you'd be happy to share the slides, that would be lovely, please.
I'm struggling to see the setting as well. Ah, here we go. Oh, it was hidden under more.
That might have been where I went wrong. Thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, so yeah, as I say, this is about the Vision for Volunteering project. And as that little subheading suggests, this is about inspiring a decade of change, which feels like a bonkers amount of time. 10 years is a huge amount of time, particularly when we don't know what's around the corner 10 months from now. So next slide, please. So what we're not saying is that we have a really clear roadmap between now and that 10 years, but what we're trying to do is just really project some positivity into the future and start to move in the same direction around volunteering, and we will get there together. So Vision for Volunteering is very much a partnership. So I'm based at NCVO. I'm a little northeast outpost of NCVO. We also have DCMS, who are a partner and funder. We have NAVCA, who many of you might be familiar with. So they kind of oversee local infrastructure organisations and many volunteer centres as well. We have AVM, again, many of you might be familiar, so a really brilliant network of volunteer managers and coordinators. We have Volunteering Matters, who manage lots of projects up and down the country, such as the I Will project, which is a youth social action project, and as well as, again, sort of volunteer centres up and down the country. Sport England, obviously a national kind of organisation for sport, and we've recently welcomed Muslim Charities Forum on board as a partner as well, who have been fabulous to work with. Next slide, please. So first of all, and I always like to make this really clear, when we talk about volunteering in this vision context, we are talking about volunteering in all of its forms. So one thing I was really struck by when I was at that event I mentioned earlier, and we talked about the amazing work that happens in libraries, is just how much kind of what you might call informal volunteering, just people from the community sharing space, doing good things, creating things together, discussing things. We include all of that. So when we talk about volunteering, we want to take the most expansive and inclusive approach possible. So that includes traditional and formal roles, that, you know, that kind of every Tuesday, every week for a long time, that kind of thing, but also occasional one-off micro volunteering, social action, campaigning, just being involved in your community, mutual aid, being a good neighbour, and everything in between. So really there is no sort of really clearly yeah, we're not just talking about formal volunteer roles, although that is brilliant as well. We are talking about volunteering in all of its forms. So we want as many people as possible to be able to see themselves. So that's volunteers and organisations and communities, as many people as possible to see themselves in the Vision for Volunteering. Next slide, please. So a really good place to start when talking about the vision and talking about any kind of big idea is starting with the why. So we believe that now is the right time for volunteering to change. Indeed, we know it is changing, has changed, will continue to change and evolve for a brighter future for everyone everywhere. We're building a movement of people, places and projects. So this certainly isn't a top-down thing. This is about moving forward together. And as a vision kind of team and partnership, it's our role to build capacity, hold space and create conditions for this future to emerge. Thank you. Next slide. So the vision itself centers around 5 key themes or 5 big changes that we want to see into the future. So when we talk about these themes, this isn't us saying that none of this happens and we need to start. It's about recognizing that this is the best stuff that already happens and we know that this is the stuff we need more of. So the first theme is around awareness and appreciation. So as much as that's about, you know, simple things like making sure we thank our volunteers and make them feel welcome and valued, it's also about our collective kind of shared awareness and appreciation of how volunteers want to become involved. So again, that goes back to that informal, formal, and everything in between kind of conversation. We know that volunteers changing in terms of how people want to give their time, how people are able to give their time. So it's about our collective awareness and appreciation of those motivations, I guess. So throughout these themes, I think it's a really good place to start by asking questions. So one of the questions we could ask ourselves here is how can we best respond to the motivations and preferences of our volunteers? Next slide. Power, always a really interesting one, a big topic sort of within this project and in society at the moment, which is why it's such an interesting topic. So really about exploring power, what it means in your context, what it means to your volunteers, what it might mean to your staff if you have staff. And again, a really good question just to start with is what power needs shifting to a more appropriate place and how will we start that shift? So my last role was as head of volunteering at a hospice in Newcastle. And if you think about power in that context, what we're not saying is that we're going to give all the power of, you know, a highly trained, experienced palliative care nurse to a volunteer immediately. That's not what we're talking about, although that's sometimes what people can kind of get a little bit stuck on. What we're talking about is how can volunteers have more autonomy, more impact, more influence, all of those words as well. Thank you. Lovely, thank you. Equity inclusion, I think, is the next one, if we could go back. Thank you. A future where it's easy for people to give their time and energy to the cause they care about and they feel welcomed. I think belonging is a really important word there as well. Some of you might be familiar with the Time Well Spent report that comes out through NCVO regularly, which focuses on the kind of experience of volunteers. There's a one coming out in the coming weeks, which focuses on the experience of global majority volunteers, which is I was at a session yesterday about it. It's incredibly interesting. So again, sort of questions that we might ask ourselves around this, other than just what does this theme mean to you, is what barriers are at play when it comes to volunteering or, you know, entering your space or being a part of your space, and how can we remove them together? I'm going to take a sip of water. Thank you. Collaboration. So hopefully a really straightforward one. Although collaboration isn't always straightforward, but it is essentially about how can we make great things happen by involving others. So that might be involving more volunteers. It might be involving other organisations, other libraries, other communities, but really just starting to open our world a little bit to collaborating with other people. And again, we know this happens up and down the country brilliantly. So again, it's something we want more of. Next slide, please. Excuse me, thank you. Experimentation. So it was lovely to hear Emma chat this morning about the fact that not everything goes brilliantly all the time. This vision for volunteering isn't about, you know, we only want success stories. We only want to kind of promote the good stuff. Actually, there's huge power in experimenting and things not going as planned because, as Emma pointed out, we always learn a lot. And again, it's that safety in failure, I guess, or even reframing what we mean by failure. So people aren't afraid to try new things. And a lovely question, I think, for this one is what is possible? So the absolute beauty of these themes is that they can be used by you, by everybody in whatever way you want. So they could just be a conversation starter like today. They could be even sort of a step behind conversation starter. It can just be something to spark thought and consideration. They can be used as a strategic tool to design a framework or a program, an action plan, a sense of shared values. So it is really something we're encouraging everybody to do, is just think how could we use these themes as lightly or as kind of intensively as you wish to do. So again, always up to you in terms of how you use this. Next slide. So current activity as a team, we're doing a lot of listening and learning, which I'll be doing more of this morning with you. Storytelling, I think there's huge power in that. We're going to be starting to share a lot of the work we've been doing behind the scenes kind of out there in the coming weeks. Events and engagement, we're going to be setting up an ambassadors program. It might not be called ambassadors, it might be called something else. Pledges, so that individuals, organisations, communities can make little pledges, big pledges, whatever works for them, and developing resources as well. So yeah, in a nutshell, we want to enhance existing energy and build new energy. So again, this is about creating more of the good stuff that we know already happens. So our inboxes are always open. We have social media. Please just get in touch if you'd like to chat about any of this more. And just the most important thing is just starting a conversation around some of these themes and exploring what they mean to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Some wonderful themes in there, which I'm sure will be helpful to the Know Your Neighbourhood projects and beyond. Did anyone have any questions for Laura? If not, then that moves us on nicely to our next speaker, Anthony Gonzalez, who is going to deliver some training that Libraries Connected have had a little sneak preview of this training, so I can say that we definitely learnt a lot from it. Welcome, Anthony.
Thanks very much. Similar to Laura, I'm struggling with a bit of a cold myself at the minute, so got lozenges, water. Hopefully my voice will hold up. I'm sure it will. I'll try to share the screen. And hopefully, yeah. Can everybody see that okay? I'm assuming so.
We can see the slides rather than the slideshow.
Okay, yeah. So bear with us. It's typical, isn't it? The sort of, bear with us. The slideshow bit is covered by the thing at the top. How about that? Is that better?
We can't see any slides at the moment.
Okay. From beginning. I'm just wondering, Emma, do you have a
share for you?
Copy? Yeah, would that be okay? I don't know what's happening there. Apologies for that. Okay, so Volunteer Futures, it's Arts Council England funded project of Newcastle Gateshead cultural venues. And give you an idea of the different venues is there's museums, art galleries, Life Science Centre. There are 7 Stories, which is about promoting literature, dance, and a number of theatres, as well as like Sage, used to be Sage music venue. And it's about a lot of different things, really, but audience diversification, workforce diversity, but it's really about attracting underrepresented groups into the sector. So each of the partners as part of the project have got different sort of target groups. Young people, people seeking sanctuary, neurodiverse, basically anyone facing barriers fits the remit. And there's 2 main sort of elements to the project. Platform for discussion, sharing knowledge, good practice, and then again, new ways of involving volunteers. So the phrase is looking at volunteering through a different lens. As Laura mentioned, I'm quite old-fashioned in terms of volunteering, and I think of it quite formally and structured. And I think Laura said, every Tuesday afternoon for a long time. And something that I've learned from the project already is very much the range, short-term, informal. Give you an idea, we've done some really good work around family volunteering, which is quite new. So again, just trying new things. Next slide, please. So again, gives you an idea of the different partner agencies. We have specialist agencies involved as well. So we have Street Games Children Northeast, helping us work with hard to reach young people and understanding that target group. We have really good West End Refugee Service. They've done some training for us, which is stuck in my mind. I think it was my first week in post, and they had some really good speakers. And basically, it was people saying, new environment, don't know anybody, loads of barriers, and volunteering can often be a lifeline. So that really stuck in my head. And the thing to bear in mind about this project is all the partners are at different stages. So Tyne and Wear Museums, I'm employed by Tyne and Wear Museums. We've got a history of volunteering. We've got 10 museum sites. We have an embarrassment of riches, really. There's 4 of us in a volunteering team. We have about 500 active volunteers across all the sites at the minute, information management systems, whereas some of the other organizations are literally starting from scratch. So next slide, please, Emma. And one organization, Northern Stage, they hadn't involved volunteers before, and it really was an issue of sort of culture change, just getting staff buy-in. And 2 things about the project that I've sort of learned is, Emma mentioned it, is about the learning element. And I said to my manager at our very first sort of partner meeting where we all get together, when I started in post, and I said, well, I've been out to meet everyone. They seem like a really good bunch, but I just hope our meetings are, people are honest. So we had our very first meeting, and it started, with an introduction and roundup. And the very first partner was saying, oh, well, I've got to say, I am struggling. I've got 10 different jobs to do. It's only me and somebody else, and I just don't know where to start. And other people were, just being really honest. So that's really good. So this course, rather than sort of run the course, I'll give you sort of an overview of what's behind it. So one of the partners said, along the theme of, we don't want to exploit people. We feel like volunteering's exploiting people, and we should pay everyone. And that's been a theme that's come across. So it's something that, we've had to, kind of change a few attitudes there. And they were struggling to get some staff on board. There was a lot of kind of concern around staff, thinking, well, are our jobs at risk? Are you using volunteers to replace paid staff? And I was just asked, is there any training out there for staff who don't really, understand what volunteering is? And I looked, and I couldn't find anything, bespoke like that. So I just kind of sort of created this myself, as if I was just trying to give a basic overview of what volunteering is. So next slide, please, Emma. So again, a tiny little bit about myself. I've volunteered myself, worked in a volunteer centre. I've started up a volunteering initiative in the coalfield areas of Sunderland, which is traditionally high area of unemployment. So you've got families who some haven't worked, grandparents haven't worked since the 80s. You've got parents who haven't worked, and you've got, you know, children growing up just thinking unemployment's natural. So it was around building confidence and skills. So with that in mind, not an expert by any means, but I basically thought, what would I do if try and explain it to someone? So aims of the session, we've run this session now probably about 15 times. And what I feel is really interesting is different staff pick up on different things. And I mentioned the theme of not wanting to exploit people. Well, that, again, that's a common theme across the partnership. But Northern Stage invited me in to speak to their senior management team. And they said to us, you know, you've only got half an hour. So this usually runs for 45 minutes to an hour. And I said, look, fine, I'll fly through it. But I was in there for 2 hours, and they wanted a conversation on every single slide, which was great, because if anything, I think this session gets people thinking and, you know, sort of different views. And I've noticed that quite senior staff will pick up on other things rather than when I've run this with, say, front of house staff. So again, that's quite interesting. So aims of the session, again, what volunteering is, why people volunteer. A lot of people think they're going to get highly skilled, motivated individuals ready to take their job. So I think it's worth mentioning some of the barriers people face. And once staff kind of understand that, they'll think, oh, right, okay, I can understand why they would want to do this. So I think that bit's quite useful. Just some general tips around good ways to support volunteers. I didn't want to call this session managing volunteers or supervising volunteers, because that implies like a, you know, additional responsibility. So I've just called it different ways to effectively support volunteers. And then again, I've put some stuff where people can go for help. Next slide, please, Emma. And again, Emma, I'm conscious of the time. I will stick to time. So really good definition here from Volunteer Centre Newcastle. I should say we've got Karen from the Volunteer Centre is like a unpaid expert, and Karen's brilliant. She's 25 years in the trade, just really wealth of knowledge. And again, define volunteering when someone gives their time without expectation of payment, and make the point that it's got to be a choice that's freely made by an individual, helps people help others in a selfless way, and it's got to be, well, it's not only mutually beneficial, but benefits the individual and the wider community. I'm often asked, I get a lot of interest from work coaches. Again, I've done a lot of employability stuff in the past. I've worked in a job centre, and yeah, it's a great, I mean, the benefits in terms of employability, fantastic. But I often kind of think if your work coach is telling you to volunteer, that's not really that individual making that choice themselves. So it's another conversation. Next slide, please. I mentioned before, again, quite old-fashioned in terms of volunteering, and for me, I've learned a lot already in terms of the different types of volunteering. Picked up on Laura's part around volunteering's kind of everywhere. And again, I'd never heard the phrase micro volunteering before. Again, things as just, you know, helping off at one-offs. Flexible volunteering, people can dip in and out. Short-term, longer-term volunteering, and again, formal and informal structured volunteer. Next, yeah, okay. So what volunteering should be needs to be flexible and accommodating. And again, if you're working alongside volunteers, you kind of need to realize that often people are fitting in this around other commitments. Could be care and responsibilities, could be, you know, some people are on 0-hour contracts, so they may have to go to work at short notice. There could be loads of different things. So it needs to be flexible. It's got to be mutually beneficial for both the organization, but also for the volunteer themselves. And we come on to different reasons why people volunteer. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, just to make sure that it is a mutually beneficial sort of arrangement. Equitable. again, we've started a session for volunteers at TWAM, that because I've done safeguarding in the past, a previous job, we've done like a safeguarding EEDI course, and that's got some really good feedback. And one of the main messages around, equity is, it used to be all about treating everybody equally. That's not necessarily the best approach, because we realize that some people need more support than others to reach the same outcome. So again, it's bearing that in mind, in terms of the volunteering opportunity. And again, it's not about replacing paid staff. And I felt like I've had to kind of get this message across, especially the senior staff. And volunteer should be, it's about complementing and enhancing service delivery. It's not about replacing paid roles. And when I was challenged on this by the senior management team, and they were saying, because I think they had some issues around paying freelancers, I'm not sure, but I basically said, not everybody wants payment. Not everybody's wanting to volunteer for payment. You could have people who just want to give, they may be retired, they just might want to give their skills and experience to a good cause. I said, but people on benefits, unless you can afford to pay them 16 plus hours a week, you're actually going to snooker them, because they won't want paying any less than that, because it can cause them problems. Next slide, please. So again, on the flip side of that previous one, what volunteering isn't. So it's not employment. And often you'll notice the language around volunteering is intentionally different. So we don't have volunteer contracts, we have volunteer agreements. We don't have job descriptions, we'll have role descriptions. And that's to kind of make a distinction there. It's not unpaid work, it's not free labor. Again, it's not about exploiting people, but also it's not about having unrealistic expectations for either the organization or the volunteers. And again, the last one there is mainly around kind of work programs, and people shouldn't feel forced to do it. Next slide, please. So moving on, again, why do people volunteer? It's very much an individual thing. People volunteer for different reasons. Could be they have spare time, could be around the employability. Some people may have, interests or expertise. I did 10 years at Age UK. Loads of volunteers, really good volunteers. It could be that, the last 5 years of my time there, I was developing an excellent dementia support service. And we had a lot of people who had family with dementia who wanted to help other families. So again, same with like animal charities, people have an interest there. Social reasons, great way to meet people. And people may have an interest in a particular subject area. When I started at TWAM, we do volunteer inductions. It's about an hour-long session, and covers sort of the policies, travel expenses. It's a chance for anybody to ask any questions. And we had a Lindisfarne Gospels exhibition up, and we had a lot of interest from people just wanting to help that. And one of the induction sessions I did online, there was about 10 people there. And what really struck me was we had a couple of retired professionals. We had an A-level student interested in local history. We had a couple of uni students interested in specific types of history, and a few people in between. And what struck me was there was a really good sort of age range there, but they all had a really keen sort of passion for local history. Next slide, please, Anna. So talk a bit about the barriers to volunteering. Confidence can be a big issue. Again, in my time, I've noticed, say, people who have been out of work for a while for whatever reason, confidence can dip. So volunteering is a great way to to build that confidence back up. Having a 19-year-old son, I can say first half I have seen lack of motivation on a daily basis for the last 19 years. That's a biggie. Probably the biggest one, though, is lack of awareness of volunteering opportunities and how to go about accessing them. And I've always thought as much, experience I've got of, volunteering, supporting volunteers, until I started this post with cultural venues, a museum or a theatre or a dance organisation isn't one of the first places I would look at and think, oh, there'd be opportunities to volunteer here. So I do think the lack of awareness, again, and how to access them is quite a big barrier. Individual support needs, socio-economic issues as well. And again, in our equality diversity training, Tyne and Wear museums have added, socio-economic is like a real sort of focus, because basically the way it's written in the policy is we recognize that people's circumstances change in terms of money throughout their life, often through circumstances beyond their control, and we don't want cost to be an issue to put people off. Again, at the moment, the cost of living is getting worse, and I mean, I've seen it. I've got to say about Tyne and Wear museums, the sort of emphasis on inclusivity, diversity, being a focal point for the community is just top notch. And I've seen in practice where we have events or activities and there's a cost attached to it, and if there are genuine, issues around hardship, we'll do our best to either reduce a fee or give it free. Can't do that for everyone, but that's something that we should be really proud about at Tyne and Wear museums. And again, barriers to volunteer, language could be another one. Loads of different reasons there. Next slide, please, Emma. So moving on, we've got volunteer role descriptions and a volunteer agreement. And I think staff who, again, should be working alongside volunteers need to be involved in writing the role descriptions, just to make sure that they're accurate and should be reviewed regularly. And again, reasons for that is if it's a clear role description and people have got a good idea of what they're going to be doing, it helps a person decide if that's something that they want to do. But it also, in terms of the museums, avoids the situation of someone turning up thinking they're going to be dusting down the mummies and things like that. It's like, no, you certainly won't be doing that. But again, it's about getting across the key requirements and avoiding any uncertainty. So that's quite a big thing there. Next slide, please, Anna. Checking the phone for time. Okay. So again, just to quick recap, volunteers, individuals, different range of skills and experience. Volunteer is not about replacing paid staff roles, or it's about enhancing them, mutually beneficial. And again, staff support and volunteers should be involved in the shaping the role descriptions. Next slide, please, Emma. Okay, so you get all your infrastructure in place, you get your policies, procedures, you involve staff, you get staff buy-in, get them on board. You come up with these amazing role descriptions, and then somebody's interested in volunteering. They walk through the door and the person behind the desk says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've never heard of you. I don't know anything about it." That's happened in places before, but it's just to say you put all that work in attracting someone in, and the first impressions, the induction, the warm welcome is so important in terms of retention. So again, a couple of tips there. Just know when volunteers are expected at the first session. Make other staff aware. Bearing in mind the barriers that some people face in terms of confidence, motivation. If they turn up and somebody isn't expecting them, it's an excellent opportunity to just walk back out the door again. Introduce volunteers to staff they'll be working with. again, plan a role induction and have things to do for them or staff to shadow. I mean, it's the same for everybody when they're somewhere new. You know, you don't know people's names, you don't know where the loos are. So again, just a planned induction is good to have. And be aware of any support needs, but also be aware that not everybody discloses all the support needs. So again, at Tinyware Museums, my colleague Helen has drafted a VIP. She's called it a volunteer inclusion plan, which I'm sure she'd let us. I can forward that on. But it's a form around, you know, additional needs. And feedback from Helen is that some staff who do have additional needs have been quite, you know, reacted well about that, because they said, oh, well, that's a brilliant opportunity for me to, you know, get everything out there. So again, yeah, just making that point. And again, some people may not, especially at the beginning, may not disclose support needs. Next slide, please, Emma. Tips in terms of ongoing support. So the day-to-day issues, I'm running late or I need to leave early. You know, if you've got you know, someone volunteer can go to for that. Be mindful in terms of other stuff, other care and responsibilities, other commitments. No problem, get that. I'll send that VIP form round. Again, be approachable and supportive. The whole offer reassurance and guidance. I mean, you can take out volunteer and put anything in there. I think everybody's after that at the end of the day, just a bit of reassurance and guidance on what they're doing. And as I mentioned before, keep in mind why the person is volunteering. If it's for social reasons, are they getting that interaction? Is it employability and skills? You know, are they getting that? Or if it's an interest, you know, is it worthwhile there? Next slide, please. Thanks, Laura. And again, I just want to say, we'll have discussion at the end, but if anybody wants to shout at any time, you know, please do. So again, flexibility. Important not to rely on volunteers for essential tasks. Again, at Age UK, it was an interesting one because we had a lot of services that just couldn't run without volunteers. Just befriending, for example, we had telephone befriending service, we had in-person befriending, couldn't afford to pay them all to do it. So we had an advocacy project as well that was written into the bid that it had to be delivered by volunteers. So I suppose that, you know, that's kind of different, but if it is, you know, generally bearing in mind the other things that people have got going on. And this is something that I'll never forget, that I had a director in a previous role who actually said to me once, why do we invest so much time and money in volunteers? They just leave and get jobs. And I couldn't help myself laughing. I said, well, do you know, that is actually, it's a really positive outcome. We should be doing more of that. So again, but careful there not to rely on essential tasks there. Expect cancellations at short notice. Bear in mind people's circumstances change. I mean, we've had some brilliant volunteers who, you know, they're doing it to enhance their employability. And I just think you've got to kind of, that's a massive outcome. That's something that should be sort of celebrated, that people move on into work if that's what they're doing it for. Appreciate that people have got demands at certain times of the year. So I mentioned that advocacy project we had at Age UK. We had a lot of law students who were doing it. It's brilliant practical experience for them. But summer and exam time, they all had to step back. So we would just plan, you know, caseloads accordingly, but just bear in mind, particularly students. And I mentioned before that there may be stuff going on or other things that you don't know about. So it's just being appreciative of that. Next slide, please, Emma. Regular feedback. Now, again, bearing in mind that everyone's individual, and I'll give you two examples on this one. When I started at Age UK, I managed a number of different services, but the biggest one is we had an information and advice service. It wasn't just older people. We had contracts for local authority and social housing, and we did benefit all ages in debt up to bankruptcy. So it was quite complex, so busy. And we had about 9 advisors, and we had a young gentleman who, again, been sent from the job centre, doing some voluntary work. He had some support issues. He used to talk constantly. He could talk more than me, which is saying something. And I used to have to rein him in occasionally and say, look, you know, a bit of chat's great, but we have a lot of work to do. Anyway, it was supervision time, and I was booking in the quarterly supervision with all the advisors. And the gentleman was in, and I just said, okay, listen, we'll book in supervision. So we agreed it. And he looked worried, and he said, oh, you know, why have I done something wrong? Am I in trouble? And I said, absolutely not. I said, it's just protected time out of this busy phone never stops ringing office, and it's just for us to check in and see how it's going. So I didn't have time to type up all the notes because there's just too much of it. So I used to handwrite them, and then we both sign them, and a copy would go somewhere. And it was just a case of, you know, quiet space. How's it going? You know, honest feedback. Look, I do it as well, but we need to wind the chat in because it's very busy. You're doing really good on this. That's brilliant. How do you feel about it? Basically, are you getting what you want from it? So when I agreed and signed it, he said, do you know, that was amazing. I've never had supervision before. I've never done anything like that. He said, can I have copy to show my job coach? I said, absolutely. But I could tell that he really valued that, just that time to check that he's okay, and you know, mutual feedback there. So that's one example. Oh yeah, so the other example was when I had the dementia support service, we had a men's group. All the guys had the diagnosis on a Friday, and they would go in an activity room for 2 hours, and they would do different range of activities every week. We never planned this, but the ladies would often drop them off, and they had 2 hours to themselves. It wasn't quite long enough to, you know, to do much, but that turned into an amazing peer support group. The ladies got just as much from that as, you know, as the gentleman did in the activity room. And we had a volunteer who was she's brilliant. She was like a ex-professional, you know, highly skilled volunteer. But all she wanted to do on a Friday for 2 hours is she wanted to come in and make tea and coffee, serve cakes, and wait on these ladies. It's all she wanted. She didn't want to do anything else. So I would offer her formal supervision, and she'd be like, really? So what I would do in this case was I'd just give her a hand with the washing up. Not every week, if I'm honest, but, you know, at least every couple of months. And it was just a case of, you know, how are you getting on? You know, is everything okay? Are you enjoying it? Great. You know where I am if I need anything. So again, there's a difference there in informal and, you know, formal sort of supervision. So again, just all of these, honest feedback. Is it useful? Are you getting out of it? Two-way process as well. And to say thank you as well. Now, that's an interesting one because not everybody's doing it for praise. And again, we would have at Age UK, we would have, you know, a volunteer celebration event where the mayor would come, we'd give out awards, we'd have like a, nice buffet. It was a big deal. And a lot of people loved it, but a lot of people would say, oh no, I'm not, I'm not interested in that. So it's important to say thank you, but it's, again, just making that point, everyone's individual. Next slide, please, Emma. Record keeping and processes. Again, every organization will have, different systems, but a couple of things to bear in mind is, are you recording the volunteer hours anywhere? because that could be useful for funding bids. Signing in and out, again, daily stuff. And something at TWAM that we didn't do is emergency contact details. You know, what should we do if you, the way we phrase it is, if you became ill, you know, is there someone that you want us to contact? And we had one recently who didn't have any emergency contact details. Again, that's absolutely fine, but we just feel, well, we've asked that question. So next slide, please, Emma. Again, positive outcomes. Volunteers can, you know, make a massive difference, different perspectives. We have, and Laura, you're invited to our next partners meeting. One of our partners, Centre for Life, they want to talk about a role that they created called, I think it's Community Insight Volunteers. And basically they've got families, they've got neurodiverse young people, neurodiverse older people, and they've come in to almost do like an access audit on their delivery. And the way David at Life does it is he'll, you know, if it's a family or an individual or a group, you know, they'll arrange the visit, and then he does an hour Zoom or Teams session with them to get their feedback. And he said that's made a massive difference to, you know, how they look at their offer. So again, different perspectives, often support on areas of work that paid staff don't have capacity. Again, when I was doing the dementia service at Age UK, I had a brilliant administrator, and we had somebody interested in volunteering who wanted to do admin, and our administrator was saying, you know, she's obviously thinking it's going to be loads of work for her. She's like, I haven't got anything for him to do. I really haven't. And I said, well, so just think about it and make a list of all the things that you'd like to do, but you just don't have time, that you're never going to get around to doing. And when she did that, she did have loads of things for him to do. But this volunteer, once they started, you know, and settled in, was really competent. And we gave them an exercise that, you know, we wouldn't have had time to do ourselves. We had over 1,000 people with a dementia diagnosis on their books. And we also supported family. So we had well over 2,000 people that we were providing support to. And we designed a really detailed questionnaire, one for family, one for the person with a diagnosis. And this volunteer did all the mail out, collated all the replies, and did us an amazing report that we added to our monitoring. And that was an amazing example of something that was really useful that we just wouldn't have had, you know, that amount of capacity to focus on. So I think that's a good example. Again, outcomes individual, they're linked to why people to volunteer. And again, how do we measure them? Soft, you know, confidence and skills, well-being, personal development. But I suppose there are some hard outcomes as well, especially around employability. And if someone moves into work, brilliant. Next slide, please, Emma. Again, this is more a local thing for Newcastle Gateshead. Again, feel free to contact us. I'll help if I can. Quickly, next slide, please, Emma. Moving on. So that is, I mean, to be honest, when I'm delivering this with staff, there'll be a lot more discussion and maybe focus on particularly things, but that'll give you, I hope that's giving you kind of like an insight as to where it's come from and a sort of overview on, you know, the content. And as I say, what I find really interesting about this is, for a start, my colleague Helen at TWAM has said that after doing this session, because I've probably done it about 6 or 7 groups at Tyne-Wear museums, and a lot of the staff who did have concerns around job security and you know, feeling threatened, of, you know, the kind of feedback that I get it now. Staff have become much more willing to get involved with role descriptions, whereas in the past, Helen has been struggling to get people to spend time on what are they going to be doing. Helen has said that people are offering to help. Again, interesting for me. Senior staff are more looking at it more in terms of funding bids. But now, we can measure outputs, but it's again, different groups will pick up on different things from this. So, I mean, it's a useful tool. I'd be happy to run it anytime for anybody if you wanted to, but feel free to use it as a basis for. I think Laura mentioned in her talk, like starting a conversation, and absolutely send the slides. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Anthony. It's really good to hear your experiences and have like live examples of how you've the experiences you've had, and with the Know Your Neighbourhood proposals, particularly, there's been those examples of different types of volunteering, and I think it's not necessarily something that people are confident in, and so we'll see, we'll learn from there. And as you said, not everything has to be successful first time. I think we've got a question here.
Yeah, from Julie. Thanks, Julie. So when staff are working with volunteers, it's just disappeared from the screen. I think it said, how do you set boundaries? Well, personally, I think there's a couple of things in there. I mean, at our last partners meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a lot of really useful discussion around challenging behavior, dealing with difficult situations. We're going to look at bringing some training in for that. Not that it's a massive issue, but in terms of boundaries, I think that's where the role descriptions are really important, because if you have got any problems, then that gives you a useful sort of document to say, look, you've been trying to clean the mummies, and we said in this role description you're not allowed anywhere near the mummies. Or the more accurate the role description is, I think will help. And then also, I think the whether it's informal or formal supervision is a key part of that. And again, the two-way feedback and having an honest, useful conversation. If it has to be a difficult conversation, then I think it's not I'm a big believer in it's not the message, it's the way you deliver the message. And again, just regular two-way feedback. But I mean, again, we've had in the past we've had volunteers who can just be challenging, and I think sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but some volunteers with really complex support needs, there's been times where the host organization are just unable to support that person. So again, I think it's managing expectations, knowing limitations, and just honest communication is all I'd say on that one. Noticed a question just flash up about evaluation. That is just kicking in sort of now. So we will have an interim report available in December. That's just for partners. And then, as we're funded by Arts Council England, it's in our funding bid that we'll do the final evaluation report at the end of March. We're looking at feedback from staff, interviewing volunteers about their sort of journey and stories and outcomes for them. I would sum up what I've learned, or what I would say if I had to sum up our project in like one line, is despite the challenges in terms of capacity, competing demands, because again, some of the small cultural venues really struggling at the minute. So capacity of staff, people have got 5 different jobs to do, competing demands, and staff turnover has been an issue. We've had some organisations who've had different, staff turnovers involved in this. Despite all those challenges, the partners all say that they feel in a much better place around volunteering, and feedback that's just coming back recently is that they all feel that they know their volunteers better. Again, that's partly from this session where they've put extra measures to check in where perhaps they haven't done. So I missed the last two questions. Was there one? Okay. Right, sorry, I've got the chat. Let's have a look. Evaluation covered. Volunteers wear different badges and lanyards. Well, yeah, we have Helen's got label maker, and they do have volunteer name badges with the name on it. Whether they're different, I mean, it may actually say volunteer on it. One thing on that just that's popped into my mind is, again, we've run this safeguarding equality diversity training. So we do the safeguarding bit, which is what safeguarding is, and these are our policies that you must follow if you have any concerns. Then the EDI bit is about TWAM's values, inclusivity, what we expect from people. And we do say, remember you're a representative of the museum at all times. Again, don't feel we need to say that, but that's key message there. Any issues relating to insurance depending on volunteer age? Well, I mentioned earlier on family volunteering. Now, I can check, I'll need to check with my colleague if there's any issues around insurance, but with volunteers under 16, we're developing this family volunteering where the parent comes in with the young people. For example, in North Tyneside, we have a train museum, gets a lot of interest from younger people. We're just doing an induction for some new ones yesterday. And again, for I think it's under 16s, we're developing like a family volunteer where a parent has to come along, basically supervising. Next question, is there anywhere you'd recommend more to advertise for volunteers? Finding it harder to find people since COVID, as people seem to reevaluate their time in life. People want, yeah, okay, so COVID is an issue with some of our partners where I think they had a lot of older volunteers who had seriously concerns. Like, for example, Live Theatre is doing some amazing work. They have volunteer kind of like literature, playwright volunteers, volunteer illustrators. A few of them have got on to good jobs, so that I need to capture that somewhere as outcomes. But there have been concerns around COVID now. The last meeting a couple of weeks ago, partners were feeding back that a lot of volunteers have come back, but I think as infection rates will go up, it may be an ebb and flow. I totally understand people's concerns. So what we're trying to do is, and this is a learning thing because it's not really happened as well as we've wanted to, but we've wanted to really develop our digital volunteering offer. So that's something, but again, it's a tricky one. Again, especially if people have health concerns themselves or family members who, I can understand why people would be reluctant to come in. In terms of advertising, for me, I think it's, just far and wide as possible. I would think about who you're trying to attract. Again, where you're likely to find that. We have a really healthy social media museum community, so I'm sure that works really well for us. But again, if it's, for example, we're targeting college fairs coming up, university fairs. Northern Stage is on Newcastle University campus, so they've got a regular presence there. I'd say kind of target it to who you're trying to reach. And I think, oh wait, hang on. In terms of age, oh right, volunteers over the age of 80. Thanks so much. Again, at Age UK, we had a lot of older volunteers. I mean, I would still check, but I don't think insurance, like public liability. But what I would say, just knowing the target group as I do, are there any, health issues? Falls is a biggie. Is the access, a massive risk assessment around slips and trips. And again, just is the opportunity, like age friendly? Again, there's a lot of work into that in terms of accessibility.
There is a question about whether you do your volunteer training online or in person, and how it can be difficult to get volunteers to come in for training.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I think personally, you've got to offer a mix. And with the safeguarding and equality training, we've run a lot of sessions in the last really 2 months. And so we offer both. We offer 2 in-person sessions a week, and I think it's every Thursday. I book that in at 5 till 6, and that was really for anybody who maybe has to do the school run or other commitments. I didn't want them all during the day. Again, that's an interesting one as well. If your delivery is out of hours, weekends, then are you accessible at those times? So again, I think online's really important. Now, we've run those sessions quite a few times, and again, I think in person's brilliant because you do get more kind of people bouncing off each other, but I think the online works just as well. So in my opinion, you've got to offer them both, give people the opportunity, because again, in the Northeast, we've got Northumberland, which is a local authority, is huge. I mean, Laura would probably help us out here, but I'd say Northumberland's 100 miles probably from Berwick to Newcastle. So that is a massive area. And again, bearing in mind the cost of travel, online's, much easier. But again, being equitable about it, online isn't for everyone. So I just think you need to offer them both if you can. So just having a look about the option if they'd like to wear the name on a badge. Yeah, great. I think photo ID is brilliant, especially if you're working with vulnerable people. Absolutely do a home visit. Yeah, and also again at Age UK, we would have, because I mean we're all about preventing scams, but we would have, if you're unsure about this, ring this number and we can verify who this person is. Do you use an online management system to keep an overview of your volunteers? Yes. At Tyne and Wear Museums, we use a system called Better Impact, and it does the job. Again, volunteers can have logins. I haven't used it before I came to TWAM. Volunteers can have logins. They can log their own hours. Sometimes we have staff logging hours for volunteers, but Helen can generate some really good reports in terms of number of volunteers, number of hours, different areas. There's another one that I don't know anything about, Volunteero, I think it's called. Age UK customer management system is called Charity Log because I used it for 10 years, knew it really well. That's a good one, but I think that's more for Age UK's. Yeah. Volunteero, yeah, Better Impact. Those are the two there. Again, my colleague Helen's quite good on Better Impact, so if you'd like a chat, I'm sure she wouldn't mind. And I think that's all the questions. A few. So I don't know what I've done for time, but I hope that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And it's really great to be able, for people to be able to ask questions freely like that. So thank you very much. So our next speaker is not due till 10:30, so we can have a little break and reconvene at 10:30.